Welcome to Conversations for Our Time with the Quiet Sun team, John and George, for podcast number 24. And this is part 14 of the mini series of regenerative living. And I think we've been going to some really interesting places. And we've opened up a space for people to hopefully start to ponder this interconnectedness of everything from the microcosm to the macrocosm. And me and George have been talking in between the podcasts, as we have been for a long time, just about these different aspects of our natural world, these phenomena that, when you see, this is why I'm such a fan of cycles and patterns, you can see these phenomena interlinked. And, this is like, in my opinion, like the more stuff I'm reading, where as we expand our understanding and knowledge of the natural world, and we see these laws, these natural laws at play, we start to kind of peel off these layers that have been built around us of like illusion. And my experience has just been that the more you give up the things that you think you know, the more knowledge and wonder that comes to you. And it's this mind thing that tries, or a conditioning of sorts, which stops us from kind of seeing the truth. So I want to kind of lay that down because I think for both me and George, this is something that's really kind of deeply ingrained in us, that we've been on our own spiritual journey to really try and take away those layers. So in the future, we're going to be talking more about electromagnetism. We're going to be talking about hemp and lots of other different subjects. And the greatest thing about what we're doing is we can kind of go to so many different places. So this week we're going to be talking more about pollination. And George is going to kind of fill us in on what he's been discovering. And we're going to have, as usual, like a discussion around that. And hopefully there'll be some helpful things for people to take away. So, George, we spoke before. How about introduce yourself, and then you can just take it from whenever you're ready.
Yeah, sure, John. Great intro. Thank you very much. And it is about, repetitive cycles. That's what cycles are. They're repetitive, and it's all there for us to learn. It's so interesting. It's so exciting, and we are just in our element when we do these kind of things. It's there for us for a reason. These cycles are there for us to learn, and there's each of the cycles that are repeated. There's more to learn. There's more to learn. It's just how deep do you want to go? There's always a layer, and it is what you're saying. A layer by layer by layer. We've got to be open-minded and say, what we were taught growing up might not actually be the necessary truth. So we have to peel the onion. We have to. What we do is it's called the word Maya, which means the illusion of self. We have to keep digging away, and when you keep digging away, you're going to find yourself. And that's the beauty of what you said, the micro to the macro. It's the law of correspondence. What is going on inside of you is happening on the outside. It has to. It is universal law. It's natural law. As above, so below, as within and so without. It's truly a beautiful concept that life is a complete mirror. And what we're going to do is we're going to touch upon in later podcasts as well. I think maybe we'll do the next one a bit more about natural law, because it has everything to do with nature, and the consequences of it, of what happens if we do go against nature. And this is what's happened. This is, you know, this is why we cannot have hemp. This is why we cannot have Nikola Tesla free energy, because we've gone against nature and we've battered her. We're not going to win. So for us to have all these things, and for nature to pave a way for these things for us, we have to be living in alignment with nature. We have to do regenerative permaculture. We have to, and we need to repair the damage that we've done, because we have done a lot of damage, and we must become aware of that. But the beautiful thing is we can hurry that regenerative process, and this is what we've been talking about. So we'll talk more about that, and then John will be able to put his aspect of the Buddhism into it as well, because it's all essentially saying the same thing. Breaking away from the Maya, breaking away from samsara, the suffering, and understanding the laws of karma, and bringing nature into our lives, and understanding how she works more, and all of these aspects that she's put there for us. It's all for us, and it's an absolute pleasure to learn all this stuff. So I'm going to pick up from where we left off last week. Just wanted to finish up on the saving seeds. So open natural pollination is what we call, when we save that seed, it's true to type or true to seed, and that's what that term means. And hybrid is not, it's mixed characteristics of two varieties. But it's not, I really wanted to touch upon this last week with the word enough time, but it's not to be confused with genetically modified seeds. We are highly recommending to stay away from genetically modified organisms, genetically modified seeds, and genetically modified fruit, veg. Okay, so we recommend non-GMO in everything. I don't eat meat, I don't have any animal products, but please be careful. We care about your health. To avoid, if you're going to eat meat, avoid the antibiotics, bovine growth hormone, vaccinated meat, because that's going into your body and affecting your cells and affecting your genes, because it's been tampered with, and therefore your body will be tampered with. Okay, and that goes for the lab made meat as well. It's changing your cells. It's not natural for us. It will make you sick. It will cause cancer. So we're talking about natural. If nature didn't make it, don't use it. It's a saying from don't take it. That's a saying from Dr. Sabi, who was very much into natural food, electric food, especially with fruit and vegetables. So I wanted to put that in there as well. We need to, just understanding the generalness of how we are made up: chromosomes, DNA, genes. The chromosomes carry DNA in cells, okay? And the DNA is responsible for building and maintaining your human structure. Genes are segments of your DNA which give you your physical characteristics that make you unique. It's your blueprint. Some people say it isn't, but I like to refer to it as it's a blueprint from your soul. This is how God created you, the creator. And you don't want anybody to mess with your genetic makeup. It's important, like we touched upon epigenetics. And epigenetics, just to go into that a little bit more. So we're not controlled by genes like a computer program, like computer programs are. that are controlled by a code. This is an absolute fallacy propagated by Darwinian-based scientism. Okay, so for almost 2 centuries, basically, and we need to clarify this, okay, because genes are a biological tendency for expression, okay? And changing consciousness. I'm very much big on consciousness on my podcast channel, Unveiling the Truth. And we are touching upon these things with these podcasts as well. So changing our state of consciousness can influence or even change completely the tendency for expression. Okay, so when we do this, our code can actually be rewritten and a different manifestation can be expressed. Okay, we are not that code, we are the writers of that code, and that's how powerful we are. This is natural law. This is part of natural law, and understanding how nature works. So as I say, if people want to look into more epigenetics, it's Dr. Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Life. It's truly remarkable and real science. Okay, so why would we want anybody tampering with our genetic makeup? Why? You know, there's a wonderful documentary to watch. I don't know if you've heard of this, John, but it's Seeds of Death. It's a documentary explaining, it was years ago that I watched it, but explaining how Monsanto only want to give genetically modified seeds to the farmers, and it's just too much of a control system, and they don't want to give the natural seeds. And that's not what we're saying. We're saying, please buy heirloom seeds, please save your own seeds. They don't even want us to save our own seeds. Okay, so I just wanted to touch upon that. Have you seen that documentary, John? It's Seeds of Death, it's called.
No, George, I haven't seen the documentary, but it's, yeah, I mean, yeah, Monsanto have been doing that since like the 90s, haven't they? So
Yeah,
yeah, they're a force to be reckoned with. But you know, it's like ignorance, isn't it? It's and fear is what drives people to, with all due respect, to buying these seeds. You know, because if you're truly connected to nature, you would ascertain that anything genetically modified is unnatural. You know, so yeah, it's really important. You know, what I liked what you were saying about this, like kind of, you know, we're the writers of our DNA. You know, because we're actually able to change it. You know, at that fundamental level, and that just kind of connects with the whole microcosm to macrocosm. So yeah, man, good stuff.
yeah, absolutely, mate. I agree. You know, I think it was very important to mention this because what we mentioned as well, I want people to go away and to do their own research and these kind of things as well, so they can see the truth and incorporate it in their being, because this is what it's all about. Because this is all to do with nature, all of it, and it's all there, as I say, for nature, because she wants us to bring her into our lives, in our everyday lives, and start to really understand this deep aspect of nature. You know, same with pollination, and going into a bit more of the pollination. It's a truly amazing, beautiful process. I mean, I don't know why it fascinates me. It just does. That allows plants to reproduce. You know, the main process is bees and other insects that pollinate the plants, which most plants need. The wind and rain also help the pollination process as it blows the pollen and transfers it from one flower to another. It's a beautiful process, you know. And just going deeper into the reproductive system, it's the male reproductive system that creates pollen, and the bees and other insects, take that pollen onto the female part of the plants, which then goes through the process of fertilization within the plant cells to produce the seeds. Okay, so what we already know is that when bees touch down on the flower, the small little particles, those pollens that of the pollen, sticks to its legs, and then the bees take off and flies to the next plant with the pollen. But if the bees aren't around, then obviously the plants need and the other insects, the other plants and insects need to do it, and the same thing is happening to them because of the pesticides. But if the process of pollination is not done, then the plants can be damaged, seeds will not form, and it will bear no fruit, and fertilization cannot take place. It's as simple as that. And we need plants to produce oxygen as well, as well as the trees. So this whole process is important to humans. Everyone on the earth and the ecosystem, all of it, every single thing and living creature play a part of the jigsaw puzzle of nature. And there, as I say, there's many symbiotic relationships involved in nature. And yeah, a lot of the pollen grains itself are yellow, and it fertilizes the plant cells. So without the pollen, the plant life cannot go through its natural cycle, which is the seed, the germination, the seedling, the adult plant, pollination, and fertilization. It's all one big process, and without the pollen, no fruit, no seeds. So as I say, also that there are two types of pollination we went into last week: self-pollination and cross-pollination. And cross-pollination is the process when insects do the job. But other insects, apart from bees that can pollinate, are hummingbirds and butterflies. I just find it fascinating because they're such innocent, sweet little creatures, and they don't even know that they're doing this process. They're just living their lives freely every day, doing this, and we can't really rely on self-pollinating plants either, because there aren't that many plants that can self-pollinate, which is why we depend on God's creatures, John. And it is like it's a little bit sad, isn't it, for what's happening to them, because they are being poisoned, and it's deliberate with the pesticides. I just wanted to add that bit, that because it's as simple as that. No pollinators, we can't grow food.
Yeah, George. Yeah, really important. I think there's such a disconnect with nature, including myself. I mean, my ancestors 4 generations ago would have been much more connected to nature. Um, but I'm trying to rekindle that, and it's this type of like pollination is such an amazing phenomena that happens in our universe. It is life giving, and this seemingly unawareness of the insects and animals that are doing it is even more mystical, because they're just creating life like unconsciously. It's quite amazing. And I actually wanted to kind of just quickly share something, because I was reading this article, which was really cool. And there's just a couple bits that I'd like to share, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, go ahead, John, of course.
Just with, so yeah, so this is about the electrical charge of bees and flowers. So I'll just read a couple of bits just so people can kind of go along with it. And what makes bumblebees electrosensitive, right? Um, there's a bit in there, but I'm going to read this next bit. As bees fly through the air, friction with air molecules such as dust particles knocks electrons from their surface, leaving them with a surplus of positive charge, particularly on their hairs and antennae, which I mentioned last week. Similarly, the flowers hold electric charge. They usually have a negative charge, especially in open regions with fair weather. The charge usually creates a pattern on the flower's petals, and the shape of the pattern depends on the shape of the petals and how they will conduct electricity. So the air around flowers is positively charged, and the charge increases by 100 volts with every meter above the ground. In response to the positive potential of the air, negative charge builds up on the surface of the flowers through the process known as electrostatic induction, the process by which a charged object near a conductor creates or generates an opposite charge on the conductor's surface. Thus, as the bee approaches the flower, the floral potential becomes more positive, and the electrostatic forces between the two bodies increases rapidly, causing some pollen grains to jump from the flower to the bee's hairs and antennae. The change in floral potential persists even after the bee leaves. Thus, other bees are able to tell whether a given flower has been recently visited or not. Now, isn't that amazing? It goes on, and it's from two papers which I can link. Um, but I just think, like, we don't know shit, man. We don't know what's going on, and it's like amazing how much more are we going to find out, about these amazing, beautiful kind of, unraveling of nature. So I just wanted to share that because I just thought that was spectacular.
Oh no, it is. It's truly amazing, and this is what I love about nature. It's truly amazing. What we think we know, there's always more to it. And like you said on last week, some plants are specifically adapted to being pollinated with certain other creatures, like hummingbirds. I looked into hummingbirds, and we know the general concept of what hummingbirds, you know, what they do and how they live. They like going to real colourful flowers, right? And they don't pollinate the same way as bees do because they don't have the special pollinating equipment, right? So compared to bees, they are hairless and basketless, but they are potent pollinators as well, which I didn't know until I looked into it. But they are really these cute little birds, and they're really fast, and they are the only birds that can actually fly backwards. And they drink a lot of nectar from the base of certain flowers by moving their tongues in and out up to about 20 times per second, right? And they can capture this on film, right? So it's like it's got a long narrow beak that reaches into the tube of a flower, and it dislodges the pollen. And as they are doing that, the pollen gets stuck on their face and their beak. And then they go to the next flower, and that's how they pollinate. But so they hover around the flower, and they seem quite fast. And you think, well, how the hell are they going to actually do this and do the complete pollination process? It just can't work. But that humming noise forms because of the pressure difference, because of the top side and the underside of the wings, and the wings flap back and forth, right? They can flap their wings up to 200 times per second. It's just nuts. They're very, very fast creatures, right? And once they're doing that, if it causes air turbulence, right, and it makes the pollen grain airborne, so it goes on them or in the air. And these are just fun facts by hummingbirds. Basically, it's just such an interesting process, and it's a similar process that happens in deep forests. You know, the tropical forests in Americas, there are these like fruit bearing raccoon like animals. They're called kinkajous. They're really cute little things, and they like drinking the sweet nectar, which has, you know, obviously got lots of sugars for them. That sweetness is very attracting to animals, right? Um, and whilst they drink it, they get pollen all over their faces. Then they move to tree, and they do this all night, every night. And this is how they pollinate, and they don't know that they're doing this. It's just pure, sweet, and innocent. And they can drink up to 100 pints of nectar in a few weeks. And this is how they live. This is their day-to-day life. And then I've seen another process where you get leaf cutters. I mean, this is not quite pollination, but it's just another symbiotic relationship that is going on in the rainforest. So there's another process with these leaf cutter ants in the rainforest. There's just a whole world going on in these places, and we don't always know it. And there's millions of these tiny ants that they they carry parts of these leaves, and they provide it as food to the fungi. And in return of this symbiotic relationship, the fungi produces tiny mushrooms for the ants to eat. Um, and the fungus sends these chemical signals to the ants, and they're communicating, they're in communication with each other. And the fungus tells the ants what kind of leaves it wants as food. And then the ants travel hundreds of meters to find these leaves from these. They're called bixa, from leaves from a bixa tree. You know, it's honestly, it's just endless processes that nature does, and they just do it. You know, all these creatures in their tiny little world. It's truly marvelous. I think it's just truly marvelous, John.
Yeah, George. Um, yeah, I mean it's yeah, yeah, you just can't fathom it anything. You know, we really don't know anything at all. And it's like, you know, slightly off subject, but our universe is eternal. It's always been here, always will. There's obviously a cycle involved somewhere, but how can it be anything else? It's impossible in my mind because everything else is. Like, look at fractal patterns, for instance. You know, um, so I think it's really quite. You know, the more you, like I was saying earlier, I think the more you let go, the more you expand your view and perspective of things. And it's like being hard and fast, um, you know, stubbornly held to a view. But that is, and I can see, you know, in my own self, like the arrogance that I've had, I still have, you know, thinking I know something. And I know something about that thing, but I don't know everything about that thing. It's impossible to know everything about that thing because it's connected to everything else. You know, and until you get to the point where you surrender, um, you'll always be tripping yourself up because every time you feel resistance, it means you're held on to attachments, whether that's ideas or whatever. You know, it doesn't mean you need to be a pushover. It just means that you can be sure of something until someone shows you something different. And then if you consider that to be part of what you know, you expand your view of the universe, and it doesn't matter who's right, who's wrong, because both people are going to be right and both people are going to be wrong about something. Um, and this pollination thing, that kind of veered off subject there, but I thought it was quite relevant. Um, I heard about this thing ages ago, but buzz pollination, where certain solitary bees use a buzzing technique to release pollen. Um, and it's really just, I mean, it's just another thing, isn't it? It's like, yeah, man. I mean, why wouldn't nature have devised something as beautiful as that? Filling every single niche that can possibly be filled. It's like when you go to a rainforest, you know, it's insane the amount of life and death that are taking place at micrometers, and across vast thousands and millions of acres, and it's everything has got its purpose, and this is the greatest thing about nature and pollination is this it's purposeful. There's always a reason, and for everything that happens in our life, good, bad, you know, ugly, beautiful, there is purpose to it. And obviously, some things are so traumatic that you might not be able to see the purpose straight away. But when you consider that everything is eternal, there's always purpose, So, and but if you can kind of try and allow yourself to see the greatest you, there's space for everything. And that's where like things like equanimity come in, because you can see the horror in something and also see the beauty in it. And really, when you get down to the philosophy, is there is no good or bad. If you were an observer of life, although that's probably impossible, but say you're from a different dimension or whatever, you might be able to have that openness to be able to see that. And so, yeah, I'm just linking this to the fact that it's our mind or our ego or whatever you want to call it that prevents us from opening, expanding, achieving, being at bliss, all that stuff. And animals are just, they're there. I wrote something down yesterday, which is, am I trying to get somewhere or just try and be somewhere? And it's that be, isn't it? That being rather than going or getting to or, whatever it may be. So that's my two pence worth.
No, I think you're spot on there, and it is about being. I don't think there is a destination. Um, it is about being. That word being, you know, etymologically, if you break that down, being, ing is energy, energy, your inner chi. It's saying you've just got to be the energy of what source is. um you're right in saying well, in the eyes of source energy there is no right and wrong. There's obviously right and wrong in the 3D world, but in the eyes of the creator there is no right or wrong. It just is. It will manifest no matter what, and what it manifests is the karmic consequence. It's good and is awesome, but everything is a building block of life. And this is what we've got to remember. Absolutely everything is a building block. So these places, what we've all been talking about, they have their own systems created by nature, created by source. And it's very, very clever and it's very, very beautiful. And you have to see the beauty inside the or amongst the chaos that's in this world, because we know how this world is true, like really is the corruption side of it, but you have to see the beauty amongst that chaos because it's duality, and this is where we learn from duality. You learn so much from that darkness. You learn so much from that pain and suffering, but it is an illusion. The only thing that is real is the light. So I feel like I've really come here to learn about nature, respect nature, and have a deep love for her. So this has become one of my daily practices. I make sure I learn something new every day when it comes to nature. And I feel, as I say, she wants us to recognize it, understand her, make her part of our everyday life. And I really feel she wants us to do this. So I'll leave it up because we're coming up to the end of the podcast. And what I'll do, I'll leave it up to the listeners to go to look into the parts of her flowers because it's very, very interesting. Etymologically as well, the parts of a flower, the male part of the flower, the male organ of the part of the flower is called a stamen. If you look at the word ends in men. That's not an accident, in my opinion. It's saying, it's the male reproductive part of the flower. And then stigma. Stigma is the part of a female flower. Ma at the end represents mother. And I just don't think these things are an accident. Nature or the creators put these things there to give us clues. It's nature and the creator, they're all the same thing anyway, but it's always alluding to something, a clue of who we are and what's happening. Stamen, stigma, is always going to be the feminine and the masculine that are seemingly separate, opposing energies, but they're not. They are one and the same. So it's always alluding, it's always clues. And that, nature isn't going to say, well, here it is. Here's the secrets of life. What's the fun in that? We are here to break it all down. And that's why it's so important to break down certain components to really understand it and what's going on here. And we need to do with the brain, our brain, to understand how human consciousness works. And I see it in a completely different way than I did 2 years ago because I did the psychedelics. You can break the word psychedelic down. It's all to do with the brain. So we're going to go into a bit of natural law next week, and human consciousness and the brain components and why we must balance our brain to one. And this is what I've done. This is what John is doing. He's doing his own introspective work. I've been doing my own introspective work, and it takes us to a new level in life. It takes us to the true meanings of life. And we could not have dived deeper into nature. We're doing it in slightly different ways, but we'll always end up at the same the same paths with it. So, and John will give his aspect of the Buddha into and tie into what I'm saying about natural law, the laws of karma, universal law, because there is so much to learn, John.
Yeah, George. Yeah, great last words. I'm not going to say anything more. Just hope everyone's enjoying it. And yeah, we keep opening up and letting the light in, man. But also embrace the dark as well, because it's important to know this this yin and yang kind of element to our life. So yeah, look forward to it for next week, and thank you everyone for listening. Yeah, just keep regenerating as much as you can, little by little, day by day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.